Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of KerVAM, a Doctor Who podcast where we talk all things Doctor Who DVDs, Blu-rays. The physical media of Doctor Who is probably the least exciting, but also factual way of describing our podcast. Because really, we here at KerVAM, we just love the releases of Doctor Who, whether it's on Blu-ray, on DVD, on CD, on download, on whatever. It doesn't really matter, but if it's being released by Doctor Who, it's got special features or whatever on it, then we're going to talk about it. And of course today, because it came out just a week or two ago, we're going to be talking all about Season 9, the Season 9 Blu-ray, covering off all of the documentaries, the special features, and all that we thought of this brand new Doctor Who box set. As always, I'm joined by some fellow Doctor Who VAM aficionados, I suppose we should call you guys. We're not joined by Charlie today, but we are joined by Ryan and Bill. Ryan, did you enjoy finally getting stuck into Season 9? And some exciting special features?
Yeah, it was good actually. This was good set. Quality wise, this definitely looks sharper than it did on the DVD. I did a bit of a comparison. It definitely looks noticeably more sharper. So I'm glad they did take a lot of time in remastering the set. And the 4 new documentaries have been very solid. So a good addition to of the Pertwee era box sets. This has definitely been a good addition to that, and hopefully they continue that with season 11 and hopefully, fingers crossed, with season 7 as well.
Absolutely. I mean, season 9 maybe isn't our first choice release for a new box set, but Bill, were you still pleased to be able to get your hands on the box set when you did and been able to enjoy some of the content so far?
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, we've come to expect from these collection box sets now, they're always very much, the new stuff that they add is very much of a high quality and really goes very in depth into things which, sometimes, which haven't been done before, and sometimes are not always things that we necessarily think about. Like, it was good to hear a bit about the careers of people like Michael E. Bryant and Stuart Fell for this particular one. I felt like they did a very good job of kind of adding their own kind of distinct kind of feel to the documentaries about them. And then the in-depth Time Monster documentary is very good as well. And yeah, he's just another fine addition. Yeah
Absolutely. I think it's really great to have another box set, and as you said, Bill, I think it comes with all the same high standard and features that we'd expect from a Blu-ray. I sort of feel like are we officially halfway through? Is this 13 or is this 12? I can't remember.
I think this is the 13th one, so I think we're definitely halfway. Well, nearly halfway if you count the Wilderness.
Yes, the potential for a Wilderness Years one, indeed, which has surely got to come, given how little there was on season 26 in regards to anything after it. I think, a TV movie, Wilderness Years, something like that box set, it's definitely going to happen. So I guess we can never quite be halfway, but we're pretty much halfway on the classic series now, which is really exciting. And maybe by 2028, we'll actually have got them all. Only 5 more years to go, which is a bit of a trek. But I just can't, I don't know about you guys, but I just can't wait for the moment when I look at my shelf and see all 26 of them just lined up on there. I think it's going to be it's going to be a pretty cool moment, I feel like. I'll have to get a long enough shelf for it, though, because they take up a lot of space. Not as bad as the DVDs, but they do take up a lot of space. I don't know, Ryan, have you been suffering from space issues with your box set yet, or?
I'm not gonna lie, I did have a bit of space issues, but so far I've got all of them on one shelf, so not too bad. But who knows how things could turn out in 5 years, 6 years from now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I need to get a new shelf soon because my shelf is, I think I've got space for one more on this singular shelf before I have to start splitting it, which just isn't the same. I don't know, Bill, do you have them all lined up nicely on a big shelf, or how do you go about it?
Mine is sort of because I came a bit later on to the collection range. Mine is sort of like a mixture of both the limited and some standard as well. Mm-hmm. So that helps a bit with storage space and everything, because obviously some are slimmer and shorter than others. But it's definitely, once it gets to all 26 or 27 of them, it will be quite a undertaking to find the right space for it.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess it will also be quite a feeling of accomplishment, I feel like, as well, that if once we've successfully got them all, will be pretty cool. But anyway, I'm sidetracking here. I just think it's fun things to talk about sometimes. So we of course have the season 9 box set, the season 9 Blu-ray. Well, I'm doing a real good job of presenting this today. It of course featured 5 stories, and several new documentaries. I think I counted 4 main new documentaries, like proper new things that aren't rehashes of interviews or anything like that, purely new. So those are the 4 main features we're going to work our way through today and get your guys' thoughts on them. The first is the continuation of a series of features that started, I believe, in season 8. I'm pretty sure season 8 is the only one we've had so far. The location feature, was there one of those in season 8, or was that the direct route? I don't know. Ryan, can you remember?
I think there was a
similar
I think it might have been
feature,
the direct route. Yeah, I
but
know that they had the directors go through the location, so I think we must have had something similar.
Well, did they do a location one on season 22? Because I feel like they went to the location of Mark of the Rani with the director,
Yeah, I think they
wasn't
did.
it? And
Yeah,
Revelation of the Daleks and things. So I think that might have been the first. Maybe the direct route was kind of a location. They just didn't call it that when they made it. And now we've had one on season 22 and we've got this. So in case you don't know, it's a feature where they essentially go back and visit the various locations from the Doctor Who stories of this season with sort of relevant people. In this case, Katie Manning and occasional other person, depending on which story she was in, or which story, location she was taking on. We saw locations from, was it 4 of the 5 stories, I think, wasn't it? Because there wasn't really anything to show from Curse of Peladon because it's all studio based. But the other 4 stories, we did get a bit of everything, I think.
yeah, I think it was. Well, I don't think they included anything with the Time Monster because I think that had its own.
Oh yeah,
documentary. I think it was just so it was Day of the Daleks, the Mutants, and the Sea Devils.
Yeah,
I believe
that was the one. Yes, exactly. And so I don't know. I felt like the Day of the Daleks locations were kind of not the most inspiring in the world compared to like the Sea Devils ones that were really cool, and these caves in the Mutants, like they were very much just kind of urban, not very exciting settings. I don't know, Bill. Did you think? When it got started off with Day of the Daleks, I didn't feel like it was the most visually exciting start to the documentary.
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I think they could have. I suppose on one level you could say they might have been better off starting with the Sea Devils ones because those are definitely the most interesting. The Isle of Wight is such a great place and everything, and but then again, I suppose like maybe getting the best ones, starting off with the best ones, might have like then kind of been a bit like tonal sort of whiplash in a way, like when you come to the other stories where they're not as interesting locations necessarily, but then again, the season 22 one, I think they literally just went down some streets for Attack of the Cybermen, so
of course, yeah.
So I suppose it's just it's kind of just what they could do with it, and it's still, even if it's not the most like interesting location, it's still interesting to compare it to like then versus now sort of thing. So yeah, it was interesting in that respect, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan, I can't actually remember the name of the woman who joined Katie Manning there, but it was one of the main characters from the story, wasn't it, who joined her to have a little look at those scenes, those locations.
I think it might have been Anna Barry.
Yes.
I think
Something
it was
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was a Nat in Day of the Daleks.
Yeah.
And,
you can tell how much preparation we've done, can't you? Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I was surprised that they didn't go to that house where they did the filming.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know what the current state of the house is. I don't know if it's still standing or not. But if it is,
they would have gone there to film the special edition, didn't they?
So
that was only about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. So, I can't imagine they've knocked it down in that time. But
yeah, and if they hadn't, I mean, I don't know why they couldn't go there. Maybe they could get permission. Who knows? But
I don't know.
It is a bit of a shame we never got that, because that is pretty much the prime location of that story. That's where we start, and that's where we end, and that place. But what we get is, I suppose it's not too bad. And we get that entrance for the tunnel sequence when they all coming out, and of course,
yeah,
Katie Manning driving around on the famous
yeah,
car that John Pertwee
yeah.
drove in that.
No, that was quite
Very,
fun, to be fair. Yeah,
that which was used in that. Well, admittedly, what was pretty much a very tacked on sequence in the Day of the Daleks, and them just driving around
yeah.
on a bike. But seeing Katie Manning trying it was definitely worth it. Even to Day of the Daleks, at least we got that out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It was fun to see her riding around on that sort of, I don't know what to call it really, a kind of it's not a tricycle, but it is a three-wheeled like motorbike basically, isn't it? I don't know what you'd call that. But it was a good fun scene, I thought, which I sort of felt like it was almost, they knew they didn't have that many locations they could actually use from it, so they thought, well, let's kind of do something a little bit left field, but still very much related to the story. And so, I thought that was quite a nice moment to throw that in.
Yeah, and it did. I'm not surprised. Actually, kind of not surprised. It kind of got banned in the late 80s because look at that. It does not look safe.
No, it's terribly dangerous.
Yeah, there's no seat belts, no like safety harness or anything to keep you secure in. And in one false move, you swerve off and you fall off, you had it basically.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, it was. Yeah, slightly crazy and concerning, but it's okay. It's okay, I suppose. And so we saw Day of the Daleks, of course, to start off this documentary. Then we moved on to the Mutants, a story set in caves, essentially, most of the time. So we saw these really cool caves. I can't remember exactly where they were. Bill, can you remember where the caves were? Or if not, Ryan, I can't remember. But
I think they were the Stonehouse caves in Rochester, I believe, somewhere in Kent.
Yeah.
I think they believe that's where they filmed the certain caves. And then I think there was one location where they did the caves, and then there was another one. I believe it was called the Chislehurst Caves. I believe
it was something like that. Yeah. And
I think I could have did the interiors.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this sequence, actually. I think it's always good, like the chap who was from the caves, who was kind of showing them around and stuff. Like, he was a really just like interesting and fun guy who had lots of like anecdotes and just like was, you could tell when they'd asked, can we come and film here, that he was very happy to talk about Doctor Who and like how they, I always wonder, like with some people who get roped in to come and talk about Doctor Who, are they like, this silly show, I don't want to have to talk about this. But you could just tell this guy's quite proud of the fact Doctor Who had been made in these caves, that there's still like, those little markings and drawings on the walls and stuff that are there 40 years later or whatever that were still left there. I just thought that was, those are the sort of things that you're just never going to really find out or know, I guess, without documentaries like this, and make them worthwhile. I feel like, I don't know, Bill, did you find this sort of section quite a highlight of the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps not as much as like the Sea Devil ones, which we'll come to in a minute, but like I agree with what you're saying, like with the caves, seeing just how like essentially cheeky the production team at the time was, and kind of just leaving that stuff on the walls and everything, not like say not even letting the people at the caves know about it or anything.
Yeah.
And even like there was like a hole, wasn't there, that John Pertwee had been in, and some rigging and stuff as well.
It's just crazy that they'd never removed that in 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that glitter that they put on the caves, I believe that they used to create this sort of, make it feel like it's otherworldly, and they never bothered to clear it up, but they just left it there.
It's just insane that the sort of, that the BBC could just rock up, do whatever they like to the caves, and then no one at the caves ever thought, we should probably, make that back to the sort of original, historically accurate. I thought like these caves would be quite kind of, I don't know, like precious, or like, we've got to make sure that it's perfect after they've left, but they just don't care. They dine out, and I guess to be quite frank, they probably market on the fact, we had Doctor Who film here, and I think they mentioned they had other famous like franchise. I don't know, maybe like Indiana Jones or something like that. I'm not quite sure. I feel like they mentioned other famous franchises that were filmed in those caves at some point in the past, which, I guess is something that they probably market themselves on as well. So that's probably why they encourage it. But I don't know, I just thought I just found it quite a fun little sequence. I think we'd probably all agree the Mutants is not one of our favourite stories. Would we agree? Yeah, it's not a great story, but that location is actually quite cool.
Yeah, that is definitely true. I mean, it is a shame because as I think it would have been a neat 3-part story that got stretched out for twice the length when it didn't really need to be. I just feel like there was a whole lot of padding, just a lot of just these extra sequences that could have easily feel like they should have been excised, and I feel like if they'd been tied up, it could have been neat, but I don't know which is worse, this or the Time Monster, because at least the Time Monster, I mean, we're going to come on to it in a second, but it's pretty much everything before they get to Atlantis is mostly fine. I mean, yes, there's the whole flapping bird, whatever it is, but
yes,
there's that. But everything is mostly, and the name of the device, which I'm not going to repeat here for in case families are watching, but it's it's mostly fine. But when we get to Atlantis, it gets mostly boring. But yeah, it's just too. I think it's fair to say both of these stories are his favourite, but of course we'll get on to the Time Monster, the documentary, when we do get to it.
Yeah, I always remember when I was doing a docu marathon for the first time through the John Pertwee era 10 years ago, and I got up to this little stint and I was like, oh, 3 6-parters in a row. That's really exciting. I love like longer Doctor Who stories. I've always enjoyed that. I've got the Sea Devils, then I've got the Mutants and the Time Monster. I think I've never seen any of them before. Maybe seen the Sea Devils, but certainly not the other two. And I was like, cool, 2 big 6-parters I've never seen before. This is going to be great. And I got to about 3 episodes into the Mutants and I was like, this is a slog. And I was like, okay, it's going to get better. And then it didn't. And so by the time I got out of the other side of that and got to the 3 Doctors, I felt a lot better about life, because that was a long slog of 12 episodes. It has to be said. Watching 12 of those for the first time back to back, it's a struggle, guys. It's a real struggle.
Well, kudos to you, man. I'm
didn't put me off Doctor Who for life, so, I'm still here. Still buying it again. Like, we're still crazy people who buy the stuff that we don't even like and think is bad.
Yeah.
It's just hilarious. But it's what we do. Anyway, the Sea Devils, because it's a really good story. Let's talk about the Sea Devils. And we saw many great locations in the Sea Devils in the actual story and in this documentary, which was full of different locations they'd covered. They went to the Isle of Wight to show us a huge amount of different settings, the big sort of castle-y type place that they used as well. It really was, I thought, the highlight of the documentary. Really, you could see the joy that Katie Manning had as well by coming over there, being with Michael E. Bryant as well, the two of them together, visiting these different locations from the story. Bill, do you think it was the sort of the perfect end to the documentary in many ways?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, saving the best for last, because as I said earlier, it's just the other locations for the other stories were interesting in their own right, but especially Sea Devils ones, because they're just, the Isle of Wight was just a very good location for them to use anyway. And then you kind of see the places that they use, like the bay, and you get to see that sort of old castle, I think it was, that was used as the prison. And you just, again, it's just nice to have, again, like that sort of thing of like then versus now, seeing what it looks like then, and like Katie and Michael sort of like trying to work out where Katie'd come in like through one of the windows at one point was really good and everything. Yeah, I would say it was definitely the real highlight of that documentary. But I feel like overall in general, anyway, even if it's like a really boring looking location, they can still like get something out of it, like with Katie on the bike for David Daleks, and it's just the whole documentary I thought was really well done, essentially, but especially the Sea Devils ones, because it just really it ended on a high.
Absolutely. And I think I'm now going to have to go and visit the Isle of Wight somewhere soon. I live on the south coast, so I'm not too far away from it. I've been there. I just need to actually go and look for the Doctor Who locations next time I go. I don't know, Ryan, did you think it was one of the best parts of the documentary?
Definitely, just to see that castle and learn the history about it. That it was where Queen Victoria practically spent her childhood in. Just all these little facts about it, and it was used for an iconic location. It was definitely a good end to the documentary, and then seeing a sea devil coming out of the water.
Yes, yeah.
That. It was definitely a good end to the documentary, and definitely mostly the highlights. I think pretty much nearly half of it was all the Sea Devils, because it's such a varied story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that was a story that had so much location filming, and so probably needed to cover it in the documentary in a big way, which I think is really great. And it's just, I think it's a real highlight of the box set is documentaries like this, that just having the opportunity to visit these old locations again gives that sort of nostalgia. But, and from us, for seeing that, and for the actors for being there and experiencing it again and seeing those changes, I think is just so interesting and so fun, and gives where, in the past, often documentaries that they've done for especially like the DVD range, were so sort of limited to just talking head documentaries of them sat behind a green screen, in front of a green screen, talking about these episodes. And, they'd be reminiscing about how great this location was. But now we've got the, the ability, the money, and the people who know how to do these kind of things to actually be able to go to that location and for them to really experience it all over again. And I think that just enhances our kind of experience of it so much. And I feel like these are sort of a natural successor of the Now and Then documentaries from the old DVDs. I don't know if you guys remember them. They were sort of like, usually like 10-minute at most, sort of little revisiting the old locations, where they just sent somebody with a camera to the locations and then done a voiceover sort of explaining this is how it used to look and this is how it looks now, which was always cool. But I feel like it's nice that we've kind of taken that next step by making it into a more full documentary, and having the cast and crew there. And I mean, to be fair, like some of the Now and Then documentaries, there's actually more time between the documentary and now than there was between the episode and the Now and Then documentary. For ones that were like the late 80s and then they released them in like 2002, like there's been longer than that since that, so it's changed even more. So unfortunately those sort of documentaries, I guess, are kind of got out of date. But I feel like even though these will, to an extent, because the locations will still have the potential to change, I feel like because they're much more about the kind of memories and the kind of emotion and nostalgia behind it, I feel like they kind of will just carry that bit more weight, and and into the future, and we can come and watch this again in 5 years or 10 years and it'll still be a great watch, which I think is what it's all about, really. I don't know, that's just my 2 cents on these documentaries, which I think are I do really enjoy these sort of ones. I think they're some of the best things that they do on the DVD and the Blu-ray range. But before I waffle on about it for too long, let's move on to the next big feature. Intriguingly, 3 of the 4 main documentaries were all on the same disc on this box set, on the Sea Devils bonus disc. I suppose because it's all they all loosely relate to the Sea Devils, and that was probably the disc that had the most space left on it as well. I suppose it's probably why they did it. But our next feature is a sort of big look at the life of Michael E. Bryant, the director of the Sea Devils, but also, hang on, let me get it up here, who directed, because I can't remember it offhand. He directed Colony in Space, The Sea Devils, The Green Death, Death of the Daleks, Revenge of the Cybermen, and The Robots of Death. So I think it's fair to say some pretty big stories, and stories with, big villains and monsters. He's done the Daleks and the Cybermen, and he's done the Sea Devils with John Pertwee and Tom Baker. Like, it's a pretty good hit list for only doing 6 Doctor Who stories, I feel like. So Ryan, what did you think of this documentary having a take on Michael E. Bryant's life?
It was definitely a fascinating documentary. I mean, he's definitely a man with a lot of stories, and him explained just everything about how he enjoyed being a director, even though his main hobby was driving boats. He loved driving around in boats and just enjoying it and hunting about it. You can really tell that he loved his passion, and funnily enough, he did say that, I believe he said that he pitched some BBC producer about a series on boats, and I believe this got turned into this producer used that idea and made Howard's Way from it. So
yeah.
There's definitely a lot of information about that, and you can definitely tell that he just had a lot of stories about his life and definitely his passion, and talk about the experience he had, like doing the Sea Devils and Colony in Space, and how when he was doing the Green Death, he was trying so hard to get that last shot of the Green Death so perfect that they tried to 3 days. I believe it took him 3 days to try and get that final shot, because first 2 nights it was just lousy weather, and he was just like, no, can we please try and get this? Because he was determined to get as perfect as possible, because it has such a powerful ending. And so on the third day, they finally got that sunset of him driving off into the sunset just right. And so you can clearly tell this is someone who has a real passion for his craft and what he wants to do, and which I definitely makes for a very insightful and very engaging documentary.
Yeah, and I think a very ambitious director in many ways, really, as well. You know, he'd always try and stretch what he had, even if some of the scripts weren't always the best, say Colony in Space or Death to the Daleks. I feel like he still really tried to push it. And as you say, like with that example from The Green Death, like he didn't want to just do enough to make it a solid job. Like he wanted it to be perfect. He wanted to get everything just right about his stories. And I think that's a real credit. And as you say, Ryan, he's always got lots of stories to tell. I just think Michael's just always a fascinating guy to listen to. I feel like he's, you know, it's always a mixed bag with people who are interviewed in the classic series and on these documentaries. Some of them are not always the most interesting people to listen to. I mean, generally they get quite good stuff out of them, but some people I feel like it's just more natural to them to be interviewed and to tell stories and just have that way about them, that I feel like Michael in particular has just always had on the DVD range, and again with these releases here as well. So Bill, what was your take on the documentary? Did you enjoy it? Think it was one of the better features on this box set?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was. I think I said this earlier, but it was like kind of his own. It had his own feel to it, and it was, you could tell, like as Ryan was saying, with like some of the boat stuff and everything, it was bringing his own hobby and personality to it and everything, and that really kind of helped to just stand it apart from so many other kind of interview type of documentaries, because we've had so many, you know, over the years with DVDs and now the Blu-rays and everything. So to have just kind of that just little bit of like feel to it was just helped to set it apart. And yeah, some of the stories he was like saying about, you know, working not as a director but like working as, I think, an assistant floor manager for like a William Hartnell story, and then how he like helped to like you know, how he helped work on the Power of the Daleks as well with Patrick Troughton, and then like, you know, how they came up with like Dalek cardboard cutouts and everything. That was just very interesting. And then, you know, just then kind of later on, like as much as we Doctor Who fans like it when the people involved with the show just talk about Doctor Who, it's nice to hear about what they did like before and after as well, like the rest of their careers as well. And just him like talking about like some Blake 7 he did and some other programs and everything that he did over the years. It was all really fascinating stuff. Like you don't necessarily have had to have even heard of the programs that he's talking about or be that familiar with them to just kind of find him talking about them so fascinating and interesting. And yeah, it's just, I always find it quite interesting, just the behind the scenes aspects of like how they used to make like the classic series of Doctor Who and, you know, TV from that era. I just always find it fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the greatest things about all of these sorts of documentaries is that we get that insight into how television was made in the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, that is, I find so fascinating personally. And, you know, I think we all do. We find those sorts of things really interesting about the behind the scenes of the show because it's just so different to what television is today and how it's made today. And some of the things they used to do were just crazy, really. And the approach they took to making television, making Doctor Who, the money they had in it, and all of that, it was just crazy how much of a challenge it was, and the sort of crazy decisions they made on things that you just think would be unimaginable today, really. And as you say, Bill, when you get somebody like Michael sort of putting that into words in a really sort of interesting way, where you feel like, you know, even if it's a show that you're not that familiar with, whether it's Blake 7 or something else, that actually those stories also become interesting as well because you've got such an interesting character to listen to. So I guess in many ways that probably made it an obvious choice for them to make a documentary about him, really, because they knew he was a good character to kind of be able to cover and had this great history with Doctor Who, with television of the time, that would really kind of strike a chord. So I feel like that really is just, I don't know, I just think it just created a really, really strong documentary overall and a real sort of asset to this set, I think, to really sort of, you know, beef it out in many ways as well. I don't know, Ryan, did you have any other overriding thoughts on this documentary, or was that kind of, you know, the most of it, really?
also worth noting the fact that him talking about like the experience he had working with John Pertwee, then working with contrasting that with Tom Baker, because at first I think he got used to directing John Pertwee for a good while. That working with Tom, who has a completely different, very different method to John Pertwee, that he admitted it was kind of hard to kind of engage at first, but once he got the hang of it by the end of Revenge of the Cybermen, that that they had a good working relationship, which I think did come in really handy when they did Robots of Death, which was, of course, such a classic in its own right, and it was so good that when he was at a convention one time, he wanted to take his photo with a fan who did a perfect replica of that K1 robot costume because he was just so impressed with it, and he shows that he's really proud of his own work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? He's a great character, and he really showed that in this documentary. So the next documentary, also again on the same disc, because all three of the 4 documentaries are on the same disc, is the Stuart. I think it's called the Fell Guy, isn't it? The Stuart Fell documentary, of course, the famous Doctor Who stuntman who was been in 20, 25. I don't know if I can't remember how many they said he was in. Is it 25 stories, something like that? Quite a lot of stories he's been in. From throughout the 70s, being the stuntman, the Alpha Centauri's costume or whatever else. Like, he covered so many different roles, it's ridiculous. And I think again it's one of those, like, you may not immediately think, oh, let's do a documentary about this guy, but actually he's got such an interesting kind of career, because although he's never really been a name you ever heard of, probably if outside of us nerdy Doctor Who fans, you probably haven't really heard of him. But actually, he was such a big part of Doctor Who in the 70s and appeared so regularly. I just think it's crazy. So, I don't know, Bill, what did you think of this documentary covering Stuart Fell?
Yeah, I thought, again, in similar veins to the Michael E. Bryant documentary, it was really interesting to see, really interesting to hear Stuart just talking through his career, like what it was like working on Doctor Who, but other stuff as well again. Just again, just like the Michael E. Bryant one, it also added its own like feel to it and a bit of his personality, I suppose, with like the kind of like the steps of how to be a good stuntman, as it were. I think it was, and just kind of the general kind of vibe of it was kind of like had a slightly comedic kind of tone to it, which was quite funny. And I just hearing his stories about working as a stuntman on so many different things, really just, again, fascinating to hear about. So many programs which, you may or may not have heard of, he's worked on over the years. And, he talks about the various characters he's played on Doctor Who and everything. He's played everything from a Sea Devil, Alpha Centauri, and Cybermen, all sorts. So yeah, it's just, again, it was just a really fun and sort of unique sort of, I think slightly shorter documentary, but still a really just good and fascinating watch, because again, it's just about just doing something a bit different with the documentary formula, really, and just trying to just add in, the interviewee's kind of own personality and sense of fun and humor to it. Just helps to, because, it could have just been a simple interview where he just reels off a load of stuff about what he's done in his career and everything, but they went to the extra effort of making it, just adding a few little bits, which just made it more fun and more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what it's about, isn't it? Not just having them, again, sit in front of a green screen for half an hour and talk about Doctor Who, which is great. It's fun. And there's lots of those on the Blu-ray, on the DVDs and all that. But also that's been done many times over with a lot of people. And so it's nice when they do change it up and do something slightly a little bit different. I think it does help that with someone like Stuart Fell, we haven't, he's been occasionally interviewed for Doctor Who stories in the past, but I don't feel like he's been on, that many making of documentaries for stories that he's been in, because he hasn't been in a sort of particularly significant role, I suppose you'd say, and so there probably wasn't that much to gain from interviewing him. But then I think really it just helps to then make documentaries like this actually a really, really interesting watch. I don't know, Ryan, what did you take from this documentary?
It was like the Michael Bryant one. It was definitely insightful just hearing him saying how watching silent films and the practical comedy that was involved in that just was what really inspired him to be a stuntman in the first place, and how he got involved with the army, and talk about how he left after his father became ill, and being part of a family business, been doing a pub, but that wasn't really where his passion was. He wanted to break into the industry and be a stuntman, and he was able to do by starting out doing like circus talent stuff, and then I believe it was when doing specific stuff for Ronnie Barker's sketch, like an act that he was doing, like a theatre production, and he was so impressed he decided to cast him in the two Ronnies, and that was sort of like his big break there. And it was definitely an insightful documentary, and also talk about some of like the hardships that come from that, and him talking about the unfortunate passings of, I believe, Tipping and Terry Forrestal, and how they tragically lost their lives in basically parachuting incidents. So it was definitely an insightful documentary, with a bit of a kind of a somber end, but yet sort of as well talk about how he has no regrets about what he did, and how he just really enjoys doing what he is doing. And so, yeah, like the Michael Lee Brown one, it was definitely an insightful one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it does just add that little bit of extra info. Sometimes just learning something new is what these documentaries are about, and I feel like that's something that we got from this GFL documentary, which I think, and although as you said, Bill, it wasn't the longest documentary we've got. I think it was only about 25, 26 minutes, something like that. So a little bit shorter, but sometimes, with stories like this and characters and people like this, sometimes, it's better to keep it a little bit more compact almost than trying to kind of drag it out and make it last a really long time, when actually you're not, because there isn't that much to say, but just because actually it can function and flow a lot better in that slightly shorter runtime. So I don't think that's of any detriment to this one particularly. I think it works really solidly to create a great documentary, just to make this a more rounded box set as well, I think, which is really, really good. And so our final major documentary that we want to talk about, of course, is the making of the Time Monster, or the new documentary about the Time Monster, whatever you want to call it. A story that we all, again, don't love very much. As I think you said earlier, Ryan, the way I feel like it's four episodes of a not very exciting unit story, and then it becomes an even less exciting kind of fantasy, historical, don't even know how to describe it, story in the last two episodes. And there's just nothing really there that makes it particularly fun. I guess it's got the Master in it, so that's quite fun. And I love Roger Delgado, so that does add something. But it just, it feels like a slog, I feel like. And it's just, there's the occasional nice moment, but...
Yeah, it feels like they were trying to recapture the success of the Demons, but go in a more fantastical way, but it just doesn't really come together. But when you say the idea about the Master wants to summon a powerful time-eating entity that wants usurp the people of Atlantis, it does have a feel of epic scale to it. And with everyone involved, it does sound like it should be an exciting story. But as we mentioned, everything before Atlantis, it's okay, but it's not particularly great. And then, of course, when we get to Atlantis, it just becomes so unbelievably dull and just not that engaging. And throughout the story, it doesn't really help the fact that the Master's device is called whatever it is. I'm not going to repeat that here. I mean, I know they say it in the show, but I don't want to repeat it here. And I'm not going to give any context as to why. It's not like it's going to help any. Look it up for yourselves if you really
watch the documentaries. They kind of describe it, frankly. So
and then there's the Time Monster, the Crown of Vor, I think it was called.
Yeah, is it Kronos or something?
Yeah, Kronos, the Chronivore, whatever, and
Yeah.
it looked the way it does, which, well, if you see the images, it perfectly sums it up, really. And
Yeah.
then, of course, there's the bizarre moment in, I believe it's in part 3, or I think it's in part 3, where, or it might have been part 4, where the Doctor tries to counteract the Master's device by creating something called a time flow analog, which he does by balancing household objects. And then there's a bit where it doesn't work because he forgot to add tea leaf bags or something like that. And it's just the most absolutely bizarre moment in the show. It's one of the most bizarre, if not the most bizarre, out of place and kind of pointless moments in the show's history.
Yeah.
And after, if you really want to check out this story,
Yeah.
that time flow analog section is something to be amazed by, because it's just like, what were they thinking?
Yeah. Like, it just feels like one of the most sort of egregious and ridiculous attempts at padding the story out. Like there's the old, we'll throw a virus in halfway through to pad it out, like the Silurians or something, or it's the end of episode 4, let's throw the Centaurans in there to pad it out for 2 episodes, like Invasion of Time. But just getting them to build this ridiculous device that is pointless, doesn't work, doesn't achieve anything in the plot at all, but to pad it out for like half an episode or a whole episode, I can't even remember how long, but it feels like forever.
5 minutes, nearly 5 minutes.
So ridiculous and stupid, and just kind of sums up this story in many ways, I feel like. But they did make a new documentary about it, and that's what we're really here to talk about. A sort of making of, a kind of revisiting the story documentary with Toby Haydock, even hosting it. A guy who I always find entertaining, enjoyable. He's just a really great presenter, really in on all the jokes of Doctor Who, I suppose, as well, really. So he can kind of come at it from sort of us as fans' perspective. But also looking to try and get new things out of it. And so seeing him interviewing and chatting to these different people at the location, I thought was, really, really interesting, and really created a really strong documentary as well overall. Ryan, what did you take from this new Time Monster documentary?
It was definitely a good documentary. I will say that, even as the story is very bizarre and very messy, and that's putting it lightly, at least we got a good documentary out of it. And
Yeah.
It was interesting because originally it started out as an idea of someone from the past coming into the future, which is only really in just like a certain section in the Time Monster. But it was interesting that was the basis for this story, and it was much later in the process that they added in the Greek mythology stuff into it. And Paul Bernard was a director that they had, and apparently he did Day of the Daleks, and apparently he and Barry Letts kind of always butted heads. Like, Barry Letts would try to make suggestions to him, and he would just ignore them. Paul Bernard would just not listen at all. And I think the one that finally reached the breaking point was The Frontier in Space. And I think, Paul Bernard apparently had no regrets for the way he shot it. Like, he was just saying, that's just not how it was on the day. And it was, just all these fascinating stories. And Richard Franklin, who plays Yates, he admitted that he doesn't remember even being in it, even though he remembers all the other stories he was in. He doesn't remember this one.
So interesting.
And John Levine, who is charming as ever, and such a likable president. Katie Mann, of course, is in it, and she explains all the very mixed feelings about it, which it just goes to sum up this story as a whole, basically. And it's some of the interesting stories about how apparently John Pertwee and Katie Manning got lost while they were driving Betsy. I think they were driving along to a point where they really didn't really go the way they were supposed to go. They ended up getting lost, and they had to find them. And just all these very fascinating stories, how they got into it, and then talking about a certain section at the end where they talk about the editing team that got involved in, of how it was practically done virtually live when they would do the film footage and had show, and then it would then had to be cut then straight into the recording of the videotape footage in studio and trying to piece it all together. And that was definitely the most fascinating bit, how they were doing like the whole editing process at the end of it, and also bringing in stuntman Greg Powell, how he was only 18 when he did some of the stunts in this, and how he had an accident while filming that horse. And yeah, it was definitely a good, insightful, very informative documentary about a absolutely sluggish and insane story.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. It's always good to have documentaries that do kind of bring new things out, whether it's about stunt people involved in the story or the editing process. And I feel like the editing process in Doctor is something that's hardly ever covered. I feel like there's no like proper documentary where they've got a few editors sat down at a table and talks about, the struggle of only having 4 cuts in a program to be able to edit Doctor Who or whatever. Like, I just feel like that's an area that's that sort of post-production aspect, which I know was much smaller back in those days, but I don't feel like that post-production process has ever been covered in much detail in a documentary. I may be forgetting, but I don't feel like it has. So any insight into that I always find very interesting, as being into post-production myself quite a lot. But Bill, did you enjoy these new stories, these different takes on a not so good story? I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've probably said this before in past podcasts and everything, but I feel like it's always at least interesting and fascinating to hear about the making of some of the lesser regarded stories, because they're often the ones that provides the most interesting behind the scenes kind of tales and everything. And as you both saying earlier with like how it was nice to sort of get different aspects of production, like the editing and the stunts and everything. So I feel like that's kind of just it just helps to just kind of put the Time Monster, not necessarily to redeem it, because I think it is a bit it's too ambitious really for its own good, essentially, isn't it? It would probably work out a lot better nowadays on a modern TV budget, but back then I think it was but yeah, it doesn't redeem it, but it does it shows it in a different light to you, and just kind of says these are some of the problems that they faced during the production of it, like the whole Paul Bernard Barry Letts feud and everything, and it just puts it all in perspective for you, which is always really fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, as we've said before many times on this podcast, often the best documentaries come from the worst stories, because there's simply that much more to talk about when stuff has gone wrong or things haven't quite worked out. And, that's why I want a documentary on Series 1, all about Keith Boak and how everybody hated him and how he was a terrible director in Doctor Who and tried to kill people with a flaming chair and all the drama that we've heard little bits about. Like, I want a documentary about all that stuff. And yeah, because we get it on the classic series and things. And so I think, again, this is just another example of how bad stories create good documentaries. And, we shouldn't almost we can put the stories down, but actually the stuff that we get from them may even be better sometimes than some of the really good stories, because often, if everything just went well, the script was really well written, this was great, that was great, there's actually not that much to say in things like that. So I think that really works to the credit of a documentary like this, and means that even in bad stories, we get something good out of it in the end. So I feel like, it's like that. You have to slog through watching it, but at least you get a good documentary about it to watch. Whereas, maybe there's some stories that you don't get that. So I think that's quite nice. That's quite a good moment. But guys, Ryan, of these 4 documentaries that we've talked about, the 4 big ones, what would you say is your favourite of the lot from this box set?
It's quite tough. It's either the Michael E. Bryant documentary or surprisingly the Time Monster one. Either one of those two.
Okay.
It's
good choices. Yeah, absolutely. And Bill, what would you say is your top one?
I think again it would have to be at least 2. I think well, one of these two, like either the Michael E. Bryant one or the Stuart Fell documentary. I thought again, just to add a different perspective on, behind the scenes stuff with the program is always just really fascinating in of itself. But especially the stories that those guys kind of told was just really interesting to hear about. But I feel like even though you could say like maybe the fact that it's only four main new documentaries may feel like there's not enough compared to some other box sets. I feel like we're still getting the usual kind of in-depth stuff which we've come to expect from the collection range. And, you know, again, it's like the Time Monster documentary. It doesn't necessarily redeem the story, but it adds a new perspective to it.
Yeah.
And, the location one is also really fascinating as well. So yeah, it's certainly there's still the team behind these sets is still clearly they know what they're doing by this point, and they're consistently turn out some really fascinating and well-made documentaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that's the case. And as you say, it is notable there's only four new documentaries. In some ways, that feels like a little bit less. I think sometimes we probably have to take a step back and look at the box set almost as the whole thing rather than just the new things. Because obviously, there's a lot of features from the DVDs on this. I mean, I don't think there's really anything new on the Day of the Daleks sort of stories. I think there's one like audio archive thing, or one from last year, a Radio 3 program from last year about the Daleks, but there's not really anything new. But that's because they did a special edition like 10 years ago when they remade the story and did loads of stuff around that at the time. The Curse of Peladon's already pretty well served as well. I know there's not much new in there, but that's pretty well served already. The Mutants has got some features, and so it's sort of like there is maybe we're used to 5 or 6 new documentaries on this, but actually there's already quite a few there already for us to enjoy. I mean, the Sea Devils, I feel like it's just full of stuff now. It's great. Probably the best story of the lot, and it's probably the best covered in terms of features for the lot as well, which I think is fantastic. And there are other new things on there. There's like the Dolby Atmos soundtrack on the Sea Devils, which is really interesting. Obviously, as you said earlier at the start of this podcast, Ryan, the picture quality is vastly improved across the board on these stories. I think it's fair to say, some of the HD footage in some of the stories as well. Like just the overall look of all these stories is just such a step up from what we had in the on the DVDs. Some of which were released like 15 years or further ago. There's been a lot of time for the technology to improve to be able to restore these stories even better. And as always, gives me hope for season 7 as well. That's going to give us a miracle of picture restoration. We can believe that it will come through. I mean, we'll have to wait until then, but we can believe it. And of course, the classic thing that's always there, that's always worth mentioning, is Behind the Sofa. I know, Ryan, you haven't had a chance to watch any of these. I don't know, Bill, have you had a chance to delve into any of the Behind the Sofa features as of yet?
I have all but I think one, which unfortunately was a Sea Devils one. But yeah, it's just again the usual kind of stuff you come to expect from Behind the Sofa now, really. Peter Davison and Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton, they're all
The usual
on
one,
fine form as usual, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's really nice to kind of have Katie Manning and Michael E. Bryant there to sort of because they actually worked on these stories and everything. They were there, and it's fascinating to hear some of their tales and everything again. And then Wendy Padbury and Sophie Aldred again. I think we've said this before, like when she appeared with Sylvester McCoy, not necessarily the first kind of pairing you would think of, but they do work really, really well together. And I think they're friends and everything as well. So, it's all pretty standard Behind the Sofa stuff, but that's, no criticism or anything. It's just a consistently good special feature on all of these sets.
Yeah, absolutely. My one criticism, though, is they showed in the Day of the Daleks Behind the Sofa, they did show them the scene with the No Complications Ogron, but none of them reacted to it, and I was so disappointed, because that is the iconic moment from Day of the Daleks. If you haven't seen it or don't remember it, go Google it, just type in Doctor Who No Complications Ogron, and you will find those 10 seconds of majestic acting of an Ogron describing whether there are any complications, or being asked if there are any complications and giving an iconic response. Go and check it out. But I was very disappointed that nobody out of 7 people in Behind the Sofa picked up on this. They were all just chatting over it, and I was like, come on, guys, this is the best bit. So, but apart from that, as you say, Bill, it's always it's always a really nice feature to have. I would never look at it as like my favorite feature on the box set, but it's really nice to have it there. And it's sort of something that I'm always more likely to go to than the audio commentaries, for example, because they don't quite serve the same purpose, but they're covering some of the same ground of having the actors talking about the story while they're watching it. But I feel like the behind the sofas being a bit shorter, not kind of being a separate feature to the audio commentaries that are kind of over the top of the actual story, I think just makes it more of a nice watchable package, I think, than sometimes you don't want to have to watch the whole story all over again to watch it with the audio commentary. But you get that with Behind the Sofa in a different way, but I think still in quite a fun way as well. As you say, Ryan, Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton, Peter Davison, our favourite trio, or sometimes duo with just Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton, obviously delivering again like they always do, and I expect to see them on the next 13 as well, or even 14 of them if they decide to watch the TV movie, I suppose. But guys, Ryan, was there anything else on the box set, whether it's old or new, that you wanted to bring to our attention as to any interesting features? I mean, I know there's fun stuff from the DVD range, like the unit dating conundrum. That's always a fun little watch. We won't get into the topic of unit dating, but yeah. Anyway, any features particularly?
Nothing much other than that. It's a really solid set, and I'm glad that they're still expanding on the John Pertwee years, and I'm hoping that if the rumours are true, that we get the other another Tom Baker one with season 16, because I do think the 70s was such a good era for Doctor Who, and I'm also hoping, fingers crossed, that they start doing more of the 60s stuff, even though that's going to be very challenging because, of course, everything that's happened there. And because I feel like there's more to be done there, because I feel like doing the 80s seems a bit of a safe move, but then again, it's probably the most easiest one that they can do, because I don't think there's really that much challenge for them to do some of the 80s ones. And of course, if the rumours are going to be true, we're going to have season 20 finally this year. So, I mean, I'm hoping that we do see more 70s and as well as 60s stuff, and because as I said, there's so much potential there. But I will say this: when it comes to season 7, take all the time you need.
Yeah,
take all the
5 years. Yeah. Wait 5 years, be it the best.
That needs a lot of care and polish. I mean, Spearhead from Space is fine. No need to worry about.
Literally, you can release. Space. They already released a Blu-ray Spearhead from Space. That's all done. There's only three stories they need to work on. Come on, 21 episodes. They can do it. Yeah,
and those. I'm watching them again on DVD. The quality is rough. It is really rough, some of that quality. And they need to take all the time they need to do those 3 stories. And even, I will also add, part 1 of Invasion of the Dinosaurs. That also does need a lot of care and attention to. And I'm hoping that they get those right. I'm really hoping that they get those to a good enough standard that they surpass the DVDs. And hopefully there's that. And I'm also, even though they haven't confirmed it, I do hope we do get a Wilderness Years one, but that's just out of a curiosity as to what they'll add on to the set. I mean, I know they will add the TV movie on there, but I have a feeling it won't be just that. I know they'll probably try and add way more stuff onto that, and I'm hoping that they do it. I mean, Paul McGann deserves to be on there. He is a classic Doctor, so yeah. Yeah, exactly. It would be good to see. I would really like to see it. But I just want to say on season 7, I also want them to release it soon, because I want them to get Ambassadors of Death out there and for people to watch it and reevaluate it and say, this is the best Birmingham Doctor Who story there is, because Ambassadors of Death is amazing and I love it. And I just want everybody else to think the same. It's such a good Doctor Who story. I know half of it's the picture quality is awful, and that probably puts people off it. But I just think as a story, it is absolutely brilliant. And there's so many stories since the Blu-rays have been released where I feel like people have reevaluated and gone, actually, this story is really not that bad. Or actually, this is a really good story, when they've watched it again for the first time in 20 years or something on the Blu-ray with better picture quality and whatever. So I want that from season 7, although I also want really good picture quality, so maybe I should wait. Yeah, and that's the reason why they should take the time they need, because those stories are really good and they deserve excellent picture quality. So, and also, and I'm going to guess here, I know this is part of season 11, but with Invasion of the Dinosaurs, everyone always complains about how the dinosaurs look, and in that story, maybe they'll take some time to do CGI effects to overlay the dinosaurs, and hopefully we'll get better effect when it comes to those. I mean, if they did the giant rat in Talons of Weng Chian, then
Right.
surely they can do the dinosaurs.
But it's not possible. The dinosaurs are amazing. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, those perfect claymation dinosaurs.
I think the important thing will be for them not to spend their whole budget on that. Like, I do actually want some documentaries as well. If they spend their whole budget on animating dinosaurs, that would not be so good. So let's strike a balance here. I think is probably the best way. But Bill, just quickly, just before we bring the chaos to the conclusion, your final thoughts on season 9, this block set. Is it one that you think's another really strong addition to the range?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said at the start, it's perhaps not one that I think we would have necessarily expected, but I'm as ever very glad that they've decided to do it, and they've put the same amount of time and energy and you can tell they've got a real passion and love for the classic series whenever they do these box sets, and that's no different with season 9. Yeah, I think it's another fine addition to the collection range, and whatever comes next, whatever season it may be, whether it's one that I love or don't quite so much, I'll still be very happy to give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what it's about with the collection, isn't it? Yes, it's a collection and we're all collecting it, and that's what it's all about. But also, there's always some great stuff on there, whether it's the stories or the documentaries or some archive stuff or something else. There's always some fun things that make it worthwhile, and ultimately we all love Doctor Who, so we're going to keep on buying them. But I think that just about brings us to a conclusion for today's edition of KerVAM. Thank you so much for joining us for this hopefully quite fun and slightly random edition of the podcast. I'm sorry that Charlie wasn't able to join us today. I don't know if he's going to be giving any thoughts on season 9, but if I have been really organised and got some thoughts for him, you'll hear it now. So maybe you did there, maybe you didn't. I don't know. You could just be hearing me after 2 seconds. We'll find out. Well, you'll find out in the podcast. But thank you very much for listening to this edition of KerVAM. We will be back hopefully sooner than the previous times to talk about something new in the world of Doctor Who, because there's no actual releases coming up anytime soon. I don't think is there any official releases announced for Doctor Who at the moment? I know there's Big Finish always, but in terms of actual Doctor Who BBC releases, I don't think there's any, is there? There's no animations. There's no collection releases. There's nothing. So that's fun.
There is the Doomsday stuff.
Oh yeah, there is, which is physical media in some form. I'm not quite sure exactly. That's going to be a bit like Time of Victorious, isn't it? With a comic, a book, an audio, some other things, which will be interesting to see. I don't know whether it's going to be particularly high impact. I feel like Time of Victorious everybody just kind of forgot about pretty quickly. So I wonder whether this will kind of go the same way. But I guess we'll wait and we'll see. And if it's worth talking about, then you will hear about it on KerVAM. And when Doctor Who comes around later in the year as well, we will be very much talking about that, because we are also a Doctor Who podcast, so obviously we're going to talk about new Doctor Who when it does come out. There just isn't huge amounts to say at the moment. So hopefully, guys, you will join us again in the future for a Doctor Who podcast that will be really fun and exciting. I just don't have a clue what it will be about, so you'll have to join us to find out about it. But that is it from this edition of KerVAM. Do to make sure if you're watching on YouTube, then check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're watching us or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can also check us out, easy for me to say, on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, EMS Productions, if you want to see us in vision, if that's something that you feel like. But if you're just listening in your car, then that's great as well. I'm glad you are. But that is it. Do subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and we'll be back again very soon. But from me, from Ryan, from Bill, it is goodbye for now.